All right, Dr. Tiedemann, if you would like to take it from here.
Thank you, Marissa. Hi, we are so pleased to have you with us today. It's a pleasure to share some time and some of the time and talent of Adam Bass. Adam, if you know him well, know that he is the former treasurer of the coordinating team of the Boise River Enhancement Network and continues to serve on the board of directors. He's one of the most interesting people I've ever met because he is a civil engineer by profession, and by profession as well as major interest, a river guide, and owns and operates a river guide outfitting company that explores the Boise River. Adam has been to Australia recently exploring other rivers and will share with us today some of what he knows in comparing, contrasting with rivers in Australia with the lower Boise River, our beloved hometown resource. Adam, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for sharing your time and talents.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Yeah, it's been a pleasure getting this going, and going on the trip was fantastic. I'm really excited to describe it to people, and hopefully it'll help them with any future trips that they might be planning, or maybe give them some inclination to do a similar presentation on a trip that they might have had for BREN. And so this is a presentation on my trip to Australia, as well as a little side trip to New Zealand too, where I was really focusing on becoming a better guide to be able to support the rafting operation that I have here in town. And it was successful, and I'll go ahead and hop right into it. Here you can see a picture of a tremendous tree it's got fig roots down along it. So it's a strangler fig with huge buttress roots on it. It was absolutely amazing to be in the Daintree forest at times. So Cairns, Australia is in the northeastern part of Australia. It's about 11 to 12 degrees latitude, so very close to the equator, and very hot, very humid. The Daintree forest is the oldest forest in the world. And so I was able to get up in there and do some hiking, which was beautiful. And then the Great Barrier Reef is also right outside of Cairns also. So those two sites are very precious, and it's one of the only places that these two listed sites connect in the world. There's two heritage sites between the Daintree forest and the Great Barrier Reef, and those are heritage sites. Then this is the only place in the world that two heritage sites connect. So pretty sweet spot. It's fantastic to go on. And so I was looking at potential guiding experiences late last summer, and saw an advertisement for work needed in Cairns on the BREN River. And so here's a picture of the BREN River. This is a put-in at it. So you can see the bridge on the right here. There's a power station here as well. And this is taken from the same spot, but looking downstream here on the left side of your screen. And so getting the visa turned into be a bit of a process because I wasn't under 30 years old. I couldn't do the work holiday visa. And so started looking into getting like a highly skilled worker visa, and it seemed like the 400 visa was the best way to go. But that was with my own research, and I didn't quite know if that was the best way to go. So I ended up reaching out to different attorneys to see which is the best way to go about it. And they have a immigration program in Australia that really is like sponsored by the state, but it's like a public-private partnership that is monitored by the state, but then it's also private in some ways. So it's kind of, I didn't quite understand what was going on with that initially. But in any sense, I ended up hiring an attorney to help me out with the 400 visa, but that turned out to not really be necessary because it was easy enough to do myself. So that was kind of a lesson learned there. But in any sense, I was able to get a 400 visa for 3 months down in Australia. So, and that was 3 months from the time I got there. And yeah, it worked pretty smooth once I got that visa. Over here, you can see a cassowary. And I was really hoping to see one of these while I was down there. I wasn't able to, but I've seen plenty of pictures to where it was good enough. And so Cairns itself is about the size of Boise, but there's a lot more visitors to it. There's a lot of people coming from China, even from other parts of Australia. It's a really big destination for vacations and holidays. And so throughout the area, there's plenty of waterfalls that you can go hike to and check out. The Esplanade here, you can see the picture with the bike, and then the 2 pictures of the ocean are of the Esplanade. So there was a large Ferris wheel that you can go onto. There was a nice swimming pool near this shot on the lower left, right there. There's a nice swimming pool that you can be at there. They tended to not have anyone swimming in this area because there's saltwater crocs. I never saw any out here, but it was probably just good practice not to go swimming in the area. It was also really flat because it's a mud flat. And at times the water would recede quite a ways when the tides were low. But really beautiful area. Up here is Parramatta Park, which is an old like castle type of residence that a Spaniard ended up building back in the 30s. And yeah, they ended up being like a place for World War II vets to go to and recoup. Yeah, it was really pretty. It had been through a lot of flood events as it was built right along a river. And so it was cool to see all the different impacts that those flooding events had on the area. And so throughout the trip, I was just getting used to a new area, being in a place for 3 months. That's the longest I've been away from Boise in my life. I've only been away from Boise for a month beyond that. So it was really, I feel like, an interesting process for me to go through personally, and to go through that homesickness and to go through some other things while staying down there. But the thing I wasn't quite expecting was I wasn't anticipating the number of like insects to kind of just be like on you at times. So at times you just have like ants crawling on you and consistently. And so it was kind of something to get used to. And definitely once I got back home, it felt odd not to have that happening. And so going on here, oh, actually, let me go ahead and go back a bit. Wanted to show you guys a video of one of the hikes that I had. Get it on the screen here. So this is a goanna that I saw on one of the hiking trails right outside of Cairns. Well, right within it nearly. There's the Arrow Trail system, and the Blue Arrow Trail was about 5 to 6 kilometers long, about like 3 miles. And there was plenty of wildlife along it. I went on that hike numerous times as I didn't have a car, so I wasn't able to travel outside of the city as much. I spent about like 95% of the time in the city. That other 5% was probably when I was guiding mostly. And then here's a kookaburra feeding on a centipede. And this one on the left was like squawking at it while it was killing the centipede, the one on the right. And so it was pretty chivalrous in giving the meal to whoever that is. And these kookaburras were about, a foot tall or so. Very puffy, cool looking bird. And let's go ahead and go on. And so after the first like 3 days that I was there, we started training on the BREN River. So this was pretty intensive of like carrying rafts. They really wanted to like see how well we could carry rafts, how we can move the rafts along the river. There's a technique that they use to like bump up against rocks and to swing the raft around. So it's the bump and swing was kind of tricky to get used to at times. Is a new technique that I was had to perfect while I was on the river. And also just that getting used to their general operation. They have around like 120 guests at times. While we were training, there was about like 20 to 40 guests while we were training. So it was a little bit more manageable then. But then the busy season ran from like December to January, which is when we were getting those really, really large groups. It was a super fun crew. Some of these guys were part of the training crew. Some of them were just part of they're already guides and signed off to be on the river. And then, so I had 5 days of orientation and then about like 10 additional days of working with other guides on the raft while we were taking customers down. So I would have a senior guide with me while I was on the raft with customers, but I would be guiding the raft and they'd be there just in case anything happened. And so, you know, when you're on a river, some things happen. And so I'm not too proud of this moment, but I definitely had a little bit of a ego check. If I needed an ego check, I'm not sure if I needed one, but definitely was an issue that started here on the river. So the raft just went down. This is Rooster Tail Rapid, and I ended up tacoing the raft. And at this point, I just started thinking, oh, well, what do I need to do now? And luckily, Danimal and Pascal were out there to help pull this raft off. And Marco goes to jump in, can't quite get over to help out as well. This thing was wrapped on there for about 4 minutes or so. And yeah, it's basically how not to run the rapid, because you don't want to be going backwards. And then if you do, maybe try to get that paddle in there in a different way than what I was doing there. But all in all, it went pretty smooth to get everyone safely off this and get the raft off. No damage to the raft or anything like that. No damage to anybody else. Another pointer is on filming day, don't wrap or taco your raft like this. Yeah, go ahead and close that out. Sweet. And so after I got signed off, I had about like 21 trips as a guide, and they were all really good time. I fell out 4 times, and then during another day that I was doing customer training, I dump trucked a raft also. So there's a little bit of carnage, but all in all, pretty smooth trip. So this again is Rooster Tail. The line here for righties is different than lefties. You come off this big rock here and bump it with your raft and swing it around to try to tuck it down through this line that makes you avoid the rock pile that's making the rapid called Rooster Tail. That's the reason for it. So that's the line, but even if you're way over to the right, sometimes this wall will kick you over to the rock. So it's a really fine line, pretty technical and difficult move. Here you can see the massive amount of customers that we would get from time to time. Well, not from time to time, throughout the busy season. And so outfitting each one of these customers was pretty intense. It would be about like 92, 93 degrees out and 80% humidity. And then there'd be like some sun sitting down in here. So you'd be distributing gear to all the customers after you had hauled the raft down, all the rafts down to the river. And definitely a lot of work, a lot of respect and props to all the guides that work this river, because it's definitely a lot of physical work. So go ahead and show video. This is a video from Justin Juzzy, who was a guide on the BREN also. He developed this. And so practice was to drag the rafts down to the river, get them all set up. They had issues with floors basically popping. They would delaminate, or the adhesive would fail due to the floors expanding in the heat, and the adhesive would pop. So they had issues with floors getting damaged. So we had to pay attention to that. But it was just super fun. We do pictures at the top where we'd do a smiley one, nice and professional, and then you get all goofy and try to make the customers do some weird stuff. So again, that's the put in there. It's at a dam, and they measure the flow on this river in megawatts. So it's kind of odd. They don't measure it by the river height, or the flow, but by megawatts. So this is probably around 70 or 80 megs. And Rooster Tail will come up here, but this is a rapid above Pyramid Pass. And so this is just like a grade 2, pretty simple one. But then Rooster Tail here, see there's more water in it than those pictures before. And we have double guides. So the technique was to hold onto the raft, going back to this. You would go down the drop, try to make it through that little left to right move, and then grab onto the rope of the raft as quickly as possible, because it'll throw you forward. It'll actually throw you forward and out of the raft. That's how I exited a couple of times. And it's not easy going afterward, and then it goes backwards. And it's not easy going after that. You have to be getting the customers back into their seats and ready to paddle for the next little set of rapids called S-bends. And that is cheese churn, good size hole at the bottom of it. And then the paddle out was on a Lake Placid. Oddly enough, there were crocs in it that we had to not have customers swim in the lake because of that. Yeah, then we just geared up and headed back home. The trip was done just once a day, and it was from 1 to 6:30, which was like smack dab middle of the day. So even more props to the guides to be able to make that work. A lot of guides had to have part-time jobs to be able to make ends meet. And so after I was signed off, after the busy season, just kind of recouping and getting healthy, I had a bit of an injury while I was working. I had to take 5 days off. I had a 5th metatarsal sprain, which you guys know the body at all. The 5th metatarsal is the pinky toe, but I did end up spraining it to a point where I couldn't walk at all. So just a few days off really helped, and I was able to get back on the stick for a while after that. No issues since. But the mangoes out there were absolutely fantastic. So a nice meal after the day, or even for lunch, would be to have a mango with classic Great Northerns. They're pretty standard beer out there. This is another picture from Parramatta Park, so Mena Falls. Really pretty area. This is at a good flow here. There were kayakers running it, but I wasn't able to. I'd cracked a boat, and it was really difficult to find gear out there too. And then not having a car also made things a bit difficult to rally, but I was able to get in some paddling, got on the BREN quite a few times, and was able to get on the Bahana also, which was pretty special. The Bahana was very creaky. And then here's a picture of the BREN River Gorge. There's the bridge and the power station as well. So It's about a 1,000-foot tall gorge. And the section that we paddled was below BREN Falls, which is about, I think it's a 700-foot waterfall. And so we ended up losing about 300 feet in the, about like 180 to 200 feet in the section that we ran. So it was about a mile long, and we had about like 180 feet of elevation loss. So from Australia, I went over to New Zealand and went to the Tongariro rafting outfitter to see what their operation was, see if I could help out, and try to get onto some runs as well and paddle some rafts on that river, just to get another feel for another outfitter and to also improve my rafting skills a bit more. And so this was a really cool outfitter. They have a project called the Blue Duck Project, which is for, it looks like the term is Wio, but it's a Fio. These ducks are unique to the Tongariro River and to many rivers in New Zealand, but the Tongariro is one of the last places that they're in. This bird is actually more threatened than the kiwi. And so they're ground-dwelling ducks that are really susceptible to like rodents attacking their nests. And so Tongariro river rafting, they actually came up with a program to trap rodents along the river, and the population of Fio have really increased since they've had that program going. So that was a really cool conservation effort that this outfitter is using. These birds were really neat in another way, because if the water quality reduces in the river, gets worse, then their beaks will actually turn a different color from a white. So they have a really white beak. And so it would change color, and then they'll actually end up leaving the river because they know that the water quality has decreased. And so while I was working the BREN River, I noticed like there was a couple times like falling out of the raft, and just some of the moves that I was making, I felt like I was doing something wrong, and everybody was mentioning to me to really think about my foot placement. But then when I was at Tongariro, they said to think about my paddle placement, and I think that that's really helped out since then, is to really try to keep my hands close to my hip rather than extending it away from my hip. So I have definitely improved my rafting habits from this trip, which is absolutely fantastic. That was part of the reason why I wanted to go. But other than that, with New Zealand, I was able to get on to the Alpine Crossing, which is one of the best, it's rated one of the top in the world. So that was pretty cool to go on. There was a massive, a big volcano and mountain and pass that I had to go through. And there was a couple passes, and there were some pretty special spots there. Wish I'd put some pictures up from that. I didn't include any of those here, but definitely look it up. Alpine Crossing, pretty beautiful place. And so going forward, you know, the similarities between the BREN and the Boise River, they're both about 100 miles in length, and that's really where the similarities end. So the BREN River is basically all bedrock, and there's large boulders that are in it, but those large boulders are never filled in with like fine sediment because it sees such large flows. So lots of sieves, and just very different than the Boise. But in any sense, I think the Boise is going to be great going forward this year to give people access to the river, especially tourists and company groups and other organizations. And this is going to be another good year. There's good water levels that I'm expecting based off this fantastic snowpack. it might bump up to a high flow to where I have to actually like see how high do I want to take customers out on the river. I feel like 3,000 CFS would definitely be starting to question that. 2,500, definitely feeling comfortable. But once we get up to 3,000, or once the river gets up to 3,000, I'll be starting to look into whether or not it's really like safe or reasonable to do that sort of thing. But just continuing to provide that access and maintain an operation that doesn't use emergency services, and also doesn't have to clear out vegetation from the river, so that we have a more active ecosystem and a better habitat for fish and bird life and other aspects that are needed along the river. So in conclusion, it was an amazing trip, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that people may have. Also, if anybody is going out on a trip overseas, needs some advice about getting a visa or anything like that, then please feel free to reach out. Glad to help.
Hi, Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, Tamsin.
I was just curious if you could share with us kind of the similarities and differences between the rivers that you've rafted in Australia and kind of what we see in Boise and Idaho as a whole.
So I'm sorry, Tamsin, that was tourism. I was reading up on the chat and some of the questions there. That was tourism in Boise compared to the other rivers.
Adam, I can't hear you now. I'm not sure if I accidentally muted you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, so Marissa, maybe you caught that, or Tamsin, could you restate that? It was tourism here compared to the other rivers, is that right?
Adam, how about I read off the questions that I can see in the chat box?
Oh, that'd be great.
And that'll free you up to focus on answers and not have to look at the chat box so intently. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation, and it's so fun to see other rivers that you've never experienced. This reminds me of a mashup of the Selway, the Middle Fork, and some of the other gnarly places that we've shared. I also have to share with you a river guide joke that my children once shared with me, and that was something like, how many river guides does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is just none, but a half a dozen to stand around and say how gnarly the hole is.
Yeah.
With that, let me go through the list of questions. Let's start with Tamsin's, which I believe is compare and contrast the Boise with the rivers that you've seen. How are they different? How are they the same? You mentioned that 100 miles was one commonality, but I heard and saw a lot of other differences that maybe Tamsin is curious about.
Yeah, so I think the nature of the flow is a lot different. There would be rain events that were really significant over there, and the river would just bump up so fast. I've never seen anything like it before. It might be similar to some of the rivers over in the Pacific North, like in the Cascade range, with the amount of rain that they get and how quickly things bump up. But the sheer scale and size of the Barren River, when it bumped up, it was so powerful. At one point when we were kayaking on it, because rafting had to be canceled, the water level was so high that we couldn't run rafting trips on it due to insurance coverage. We went down to the river with our kayaks, put them down away from the river a ways, and then went and ran shuttle, came back to our kayaks, and within a half an hour, the river had risen 3/4 to a full meter higher. And the riverbed is about, it's wider than the Boise River even. So it was a significant amount of water going through it. And I guess that's wider than the Boise River here, which is kind of tough to compare because it's so channelized. But as far as where the channel is at on the Boise River, like, it was definitely a little bit wider. Some other differences would be the insects around it. There would be spiders that would probably be around like 3 inches from leg to leg, and those would be hopping around the rocks at times. And so that was kind of nerve-wracking to see those. Definitely made you hurry up and also look into your kayak before getting back into it. And so another difference was the water quality. The Boise River is a lot more clean, and the quality of water on the BREN was pretty poor. So poor that some guides ended up getting flushing bacteria from it, and were out for a couple weeks or even a month because of it. Yeah, it got pretty gross at times.
Adam, is that variability in flow because of the operation of the upstream dam?
So it was, when it gets that high, it's a run of river dam. And yeah, they hold back. They do have to fill the reservoir, but at some point it becomes a run of river dam. And yeah, they're just they just let it flow over the spillway.
And what's the source of the pollutants that were upsetting to you?
It was a lot of ag runoff. That's my understanding. It's a lot of agricultural runoff from the tablelands. So you can go ahead and show, here's cans here, and the BREN River started over at Mount Hippopotami. And there's a diatreme here, which is a really neat geological feature. But this is the origination of the BREN River, and it flows north through all these all these agricultural lands, and over into the BREN River. And this is the BREN River Gorge. It's about northwest of Cairns by 15 miles, 10 miles or so. And so there's the BREN Falls, and the bridge is right here that we put in at.
So we indeed are fortunate that at least Boise is located below a watershed that's protected by national forests, but we certainly see the agricultural implications when we come to Middleton, Caldwell, and downstream communities, similar to what you're describing.
Yeah, that's very true. I guess was just considering the area immediately in Boise, but once you get down to Middleton and lower on the watershed, yeah, that's correct.
Okay, we have a question from Patrick Wickham. With so many tourists from different countries, how did you communicate with people who all speak different languages?
Well, at times I'd have to speak Mandarin. And so that was something that we would just get buddied up with a group, and that's your group to guide for the day. And so one of the first questions is, are you all right with English? And at times it was not really. And most of the time they spoke Mandarin or another dialect of it. So I was able to pick up Shenjing, which is forward, Hotsui, which is backwards, Tiang, which is stop. And yeah, then there was left and right, and I'd have to, man, I already lost what left was. But yeah, that was interesting to work with people that had never rafted before, and also I couldn't communicate well with.
Ever get the question, where's the bathroom?
Oh yeah, definitely. Lavatory, facility, find a tree, that sort of thing. And then just have them jump into the river at times if they needed to go. But for the most part, no real issues with that.
Nice. Tamsin asks a question. Can you give an example of converting megahertz to cubic feet per second?
Oh yeah, it was in megawatts. I might have said megahertz, but yeah, there was no conversion really. So there was a gauge, a foot gauge on the Lake Placid down here, which I ended up starting to use, but there was no, we didn't have any way to correlate the megawatts to the foot gauge. At least I didn't initially, but then after staying there for like a month and a half or 2 months, I was able to kind of figure out what to expect. It was, yeah, it was kind of odd that wasn't really pinned down and explained to us. I thought that was kind of odd, but yeah, I hope that answers your question. That's the best I could do.
Makes me think the priority is energy production rather than river flows for nature.
Right. Yeah. And so the operation here is that they have solar panels during the day that are activated, and then right around like 3 o'clock, they start turning on the dam to run hydroelectric past that time frame.
We have time for more questions. You can either shout them out loud using the audio feature on Zoom, or you can post them in the chat. I have a question, Adam. Would you go back? And if not, where else do you wish to go to try out your skills?
I think I would definitely go back, but it would be under a different situation. You know, everything changes from year to year. This was tremendous to get my skills honed and to understand rafting operations a bit better also, and trying to apply things to the Boise River outdoor opportunities. I'm always up to going into new places. Saying that, I know that there's a lot of things for me to do here, and I need to weigh that before going on such a large trip. But it was special and felt good to go and be in a new place for that long of a time. So I would be willing to do it again. I think that urge has definitely been completed though. So I don't have like as big of an urge now as I did before.
You've scratched the itch.
Exactly.
Other questions? Well, Adam can always be reached through the Boise River Enhancement Network website. Many thanks to you, Adam, for sharing your story with us. For Marissa Keith, our coordinator who keeps the train running on time, and other people on this Zoom call, Kathy Peter, who's one of the original founders of the Boise River Enhancement Network, and Tamsin Bingley, who serves as the treasurer of the board of directors and who is the heart and soul of the organization. My name's Rob Tiedemann. I serve as the president of the board of directors. It is such a pleasure to be with you today. We hope you will join us for other Brown Riverside chats. We have several that are in the planning stage. One has to do with our partnership with the University of Idaho, working a study of mercury in the Boise River and other rivers throughout the Northwest, and using crayfish as a sentinel to gather mercury and to report for us the concentrations that we find throughout the watersheds. And we would like to report to you on other interesting topics as well. So if you have some suggestions on what you might like to learn more about, we're eager to scratch your itch. Please post that. Ask Marissa via our email address, and we'll see what we can do if there's some magic we can make for you. As always, we welcome your contributions of time, talent, and treasure. If you wish to donate to the Boise River Enhancement Network, please visit our website, hit the donate button, and you can help make magic happen. That we are happy to offer our time and talent and expertise to make the Boise River a happy, healthy place for all to enjoy. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.